In this video, I'm going to go through the calculations for process costing with no beginning inventory. Remember, the difference between weighted average and FIFO process costing is the treatment of beginning inventory. So when there is no beginning inventory, the two methods are the same. Let's go ahead and turn now to the spreadsheet. You can see that I have a column for units and a column for dollars, and then a pretty typical set of descriptions: beginning inventory, and then what we add. So let's talk about what we add first. We're going to start out with one column for units. So let's assume that we started 280,000 units over the course of the month. Now dollars, this is a single column for dollars right now, and what I'm assuming at the moment is that materials and conversion are both added evenly throughout the process. We're going to do another example after this one where I split up materials and conversion separately. During the course of the month, we added $900,000 worth of direct materials, direct labor, and applied manufacturing overhead, or materials and conversion. So the next thing we have to do is figure out what we have to account for. We have to account for a total of 280,000 units and $900,000. Again, with no beginning inventory, this is pretty straightforward. What we need to figure out next is how many units were completed during the month. And in our example, we're going to say 228,000 units were completed during the month. That means I have 52,000 units left. But these 52,000 units are in some degree of completion sitting on the plant floor. And so we need to figure out exactly what degree of completion they are. Now, perhaps what will happen is a manager will go out and will say, okay, it looks like they're this far along. Or more likely, there'll be some pre-established policy that says, okay, we're going to treat our inventory as a certain percentage complete at the end of every period. This can be a judgment call, but in this example, let's just say 75% complete. Now, the new concept in process costing is equivalent units. So with equivalent units, what we need to do is we need to figure out how many units we could have made during the month if we had actually started and finished one unit at a time. We're going to start out with those that we started and completed during the month. These are always going to be 100% complete, right? If we started them during the month and we finished them during the month, then they are 100% complete. The next part is ending WIP. Okay, so we're going to just put down ending WIP, and we have 52,000 units that are 75% complete. So if I had actually done one unit at a time and started and finished them, which of course, if we're talking about gallons of gasoline or gallons of milk, we're not going to be able to start and complete one unit at a time. That's why this is equivalent. We started 52,000 units that are 75% complete, and that's the equivalent of having done 39,000 units from start to finish. So my total equivalent units is 267,000 units. So the next thing I need to figure out is the cost per equivalent unit. I have 267,000 equivalent units, and I have $900,000 worth of money to account for. Now remember, when we want cost per something, the cost is first, per means divided by, and then something. So this is cost divided by equivalent units. So I'm going to take the $900,000 and divide it by the $267,000. You want to make sure that if you are doing this by hand, you are taking it out at least 6 decimal places in your calculator, because if you don't, you are going to have some rounding errors. Of course, if you're doing it in Excel, it doesn't matter how many decimals we display. Excel uses all of them out to many, many, many decimals, even if it's not showing on the screen. So now that we have that cost per equivalent unit, what we want to do is we want to take the 228,000 times this cost per equivalent unit, and I'm rounding that to the nearest whole dollar. So we have $768,539 attached to those units. And of course, those go to finished goods inventory. I'm going to calculate the value of my ending inventory two different ways. First of all, I'm going to just take this and I'm going to subtract this. So I have 131,461, and we know that these two numbers together have to equal 900,000 because I subtracted. But I want to check to make sure that that's right. So I'm going to take my 39,000 equivalent units and I'm going to multiply that by the cost per equivalent unit. And I'm going to compare those two numbers. And those are, in fact, the same. So we've done that math correctly. This is going to be pretty straightforward when you're doing no beginning inventory or doing weighted average. But this is a very important step when you get to first in, first out, because sometimes you can make a mathematical error that's a little less obvious. So the next thing we need to do is we need to journalize the transfer. And so in this case, it's going into finished goods inventory in the amount of $768,539. And it is coming out of work in process. So that is the journal entry to journalize the transfer of goods from work in process to finished goods inventory. The final step is to determine the per unit cost of inventory that's been transferred out, or finished goods inventory. So in this case, we're going to take the total cost and we're going to divide it by units, and that gives us $3.37. You'll notice that this is the same as the cost per equivalent unit below, and this holds true for right now and for the weighted average method. Finally, I might want to know what my ending work in process inventory balance is, and of course, it is the $131,461. This concludes the video on process costing with no beginning inventory, assuming that materials and conversion costs are added evenly over the course of the month.